I froze at the doorway to his room, gripping the doorframe tightly. My heart sank as I watched him sitting on the floor, shoulders shaking, his phone lying face down beside him, screen shattered like broken dreams. My stepson had always been confident, unshakable. But now, watching him curled up, his head bowed low, my chest tightened painfully. Quietly, I moved closer. He didn't hear me approaching, absorbed by his hurt. As I glanced down, fragments of a text flashed from his cracked screen. Cruel words, careless laughter from the girl he trusted. She mocked him openly, shattering his dignity. My throat burned, anger mingling with sorrow. I wanted to shield him, erase his pain. But how? I took a shaky breath, resisting the impulse to touch his shoulder, knowing how fragile pride can be at 18. I stepped back softly into the hall, my own emotions swirling wildly. Could I have done something to prevent this? Maybe I missed the signs he was struggling, distracted by my own life. Returning to my bedroom, thoughts raced through my mind. The harshness teenagers could show each other terrified me. He was hurting, deeply vulnerable, yet he'd closed himself off completely. I felt helpless, trapped between respecting his privacy and desperate to support him. Was I failing as his stepmother, not realizing sooner how fragile his heart was? Guilt gnawed at me as I paced quietly, reflecting on how quickly lives can unravel from careless words. It struck me painfully how easily confidence breaks and how long healing truly takes. I questioned my role, wondering if I was strong enough to guide him through this darkness. Yet, in this pain, something shifted inside me. My purpose became clear. I would not stand back passively. He needed compassion, patience, and quiet strength from me. I knew this crisis could shape him, teaching him either resilience or bitterness. My responsibility was immense, but the clarity felt empowering. I would support him through every step, even silently, until he felt ready to let me in. In that moment, as evening shadows stretched across the walls, I made a silent promise. He would never have to face this alone again. The next few days felt heavy, as though a dark cloud had settled over our home. My stepson stayed locked away in his room, silent, distant, unreachable. I caught glimpses of him only briefly as he drifted through the house, avoiding eye contact. His shoulders slumped and posture defeated. It broke my heart to see him withdrawing, his bright energy dimming with each passing day. I decided to show my support in subtle ways, careful not to push too hard. I prepared his favorite dinners, leaving meals outside his door, quietly hoping that small gestures would reach him where words couldn't. Sometimes I'd notice the dishes were barely touched, other times empty, but the door remained closed. Each untouched plate felt like a quiet rejection, a barrier between us growing stronger. Reflecting in solitude, I questioned my approach. Was patience truly the right path? Or should I try harder, intervene more directly? Doubt clouded my mind. I feared my hesitation was pushing him further away. Memories flooded my thoughts. Moments when he'd been younger, full of smiles, easy laughter filling the house. Now the silence was deafening, a stark reminder of how much he'd changed and how disconnected we'd become. Yet I understood him. Pain could make anyone retreat, especially at 18 when every emotion felt amplified. My own youth hadn't been easy either, so I empathized deeply with his need for space, even if it hurt to give it. I resolved to maintain consistency, offering gentle reminders that he wasn't alone, waiting patiently for him to reach out when he was ready. As days passed, my emotions swung between hope and despair. Nights felt longer, the stillness heavier. I stayed awake late, listening for any sign from his room. Music, movement, a sigh. Anything that suggested he was processing, healing, and perhaps finding a path forward. But the silence remained stubborn, deepening my worry. One evening, after placing another dinner tray by his door, I paused. Behind the closed door, soft movement rustled. Footsteps, a chair scraping softly against the floor. My heartbeat quickened. Perhaps he was finally ready to re-engage. Yet the moment passed without further sound. I stepped away quietly, disappointment lingering alongside cautious optimism. Late that night, alone in the dim kitchen, I sipped tea, reflecting on my role. Love demanded patience, understanding, and unwavering support, even when met with silence. Every relationship had valleys and peaks, and navigating those valleys required resilience. It was a lesson I'd learned through experience. Trust grows strongest when tested. I knew this period was crucial for us both. It was an opportunity to redefine our bond, to rebuild trust and closeness from the ashes of pain. Yes, silence could feel defeating, but it also held the potential for growth. I had to believe this isolation wasn't permanent. Healing would come, slowly, quietly, and my presence would remain constant. Lying awake in bed later, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts circled endlessly around him. I knew I couldn't shield him from life's hardships, nor could I rush his healing. But I could stand beside him, invisible yet unwavering, until he felt safe enough to open that door again. My strength and patience would be his silent reassurance that someone cared deeply, genuinely, without conditions. Sleep finally came, uneasy, yet hopeful, with a renewed sense of purpose guiding me forward. That evening, unable to bear the suffocating silence at home, I stepped outside to clear my head. Walking slowly through familiar streets, my thoughts twisted restlessly. Suddenly, I heard a voice calling my name, a voice I hadn't heard in years. Turning, I saw him, an old friend, someone who once knew me better than most. Warm memories surged back as he approached, his eyes full of genuine surprise and warmth. We began to talk, sharing updates, laughter, and nostalgia. It felt so refreshing after days of isolation and tension at home. With each word exchanged, my worries momentarily faded, replaced by the comfort of familiarity. Yet underneath this relief lingered a quiet guilt, reminding me of my obligations, my marriage, and my troubled stepson waiting at home. As our conversation deepened, I sensed the atmosphere shift subtly. He leaned slightly closer, his eyes softening, reflecting emotions I'd long forgotten. My heart raced, confusion mixed with longing. Before I could react, he gently leaned in and kissed me softly, tenderly. For a brief second, I allowed myself to be pulled into the warmth, overwhelmed by emotions long buried. But then clarity struck hard, like icy water. What was I doing? I pulled away immediately, breathless, shaken. He seemed understanding, apologetic, but I felt my heart heavy with regret. My mind swirled with questions. Was my loneliness so strong that I'd risk everything I cherished? Could this single lapse undo the family I'd worked so hard to build? Walking home alone afterward, shame shadowed every step. I struggled to understand how I'd allowed it to happen. The line I'd crossed haunted me deeply, threatening everything I valued. I'd spent days worrying about my stepson's struggles, yet failed to recognize my own vulnerability, my own emotional turmoil, until now. Entering our quiet house, I paused outside my stepson's closed door, listening silently. Inside, he faced his own battles, unaware that tonight I too had stumbled, proving once more how complicated and fragile we truly are. Standing there, humbled, I promised myself it wouldn't happen again. Mistakes teach painful lessons, but they also illuminate paths forward. Tonight, I learned mine. The next morning, I woke up still burdened by the weight of my mistake, but life required movement forward. Entering the kitchen, I was surprised to find my stepson already there, quietly helping by unloading the dishwasher. It was the first time in weeks I'd seen him voluntarily emerge from his solitude to participate in household tasks. I paused, watching him silently, feeling a delicate sense of hope. He moved slowly, almost hesitantly, as though testing his strength after a long illness. My heart warmed as I realized he might finally be ready to reconnect, even in such a small, ordinary way. A faint smile formed on my lips, appreciating the courage it took him to take these first steps toward healing. Throughout the day, subtle shifts continued. He lingered more often in common spaces, tidying up or quietly assisting with chores, though still mostly avoiding conversation. Each small action felt meaningful, signaling a readiness to move past his pain. It reminded me of how important patience is, how healing rarely comes in dramatic breakthroughs, but rather in gentle, consistent gestures. As I observed him closely, a pang of guilt resurfaced, reminding me of my own recent misstep. How could I guide him honestly when I'd faltered myself? Yet, reflecting deeper, I realized this imperfection made me human, relatable, better able to understand his struggle. Mistakes could separate people, but they could also offer lessons and connections if faced openly. That evening, as I quietly prepared dinner, he stepped beside me, silently handing me utensils, plates, ingredients, our movements synchronized without needing words. For the first time in days, our silence didn't feel strained. Instead, it felt comforting. I sensed trust slowly rebuilding between us, brick by careful brick. In the stillness of that moment, clarity settled within me. Relationships, I realized, are never built purely on perfection or constant harmony, but rather on resilience and mutual understanding. Real strength lies not in the absence of mistakes, but in our willingness to face them, to grow, and to heal together. Late in the evening, as I finished cleaning the kitchen, I heard my stepson's voice rise sharply from his room. My body froze instinctively, sensing tension. I set the dishes down quietly and approached his door, cautious not to invade his privacy, yet deeply concerned. His voice trembled, anger mixing with distress as he spoke to someone on the phone. Though I couldn't make out the exact words, the frustration was clear, and the painful edge in his tone cut through me. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from inside, followed by a sharp silence. My heart skipped, worry surging through my veins. Without thinking, I pushed open his door slightly. Inside, he stood breathing heavily, his phone on the floor again, barely intact. Tears of frustration filled his eyes. He turned, saw me, and quickly wiped his face, embarrassment flashing across his features. I gently stepped back, quietly retreating, knowing he needed space. But as I moved down the hallway, my chest tightened painfully. Witnessing his struggle yet again, I realized we'd both been caught in a cycle of silence, each hiding our vulnerabilities. How could healing occur if neither of us acknowledged the pain openly? That night, alone in my room, I reflected deeply on what I'd witnessed. My stepson's emotional outburst mirrored my own recent lapse. Both of us struggling privately, both afraid to reveal our wounds. It struck me how easily silence could isolate us, how unresolved pain only intensified behind closed doors. I remembered moments from my youth, facing emotional battles alone, and how desperately I'd wish someone would simply say, "You're not alone." Maybe it was time I became that voice for him. Maybe our family needed openness, the courage to confront our struggles directly, instead of hiding behind careful silence. But how do I approach him without pushing him further away? My mind turned over scenarios, searching for answers, balance between respect for boundaries and genuine support. I understood that rebuilding trust and emotional safety required careful, delicate handling. Yet, avoidance would only deepen wounds, delay healing. In quiet reflection, I resolved to find a moment soon, calmly and gently, to let him know explicitly, he's safe, valued, and never alone in this battle. Perhaps by allowing vulnerability into our interactions, we'd finally break the cycle that had trapped us both. That realization comforted me as I drifted toward sleep. Tomorrow, I'd begin taking down the walls we'd silently built, brick by brick, word by careful word. A few days later, while walking home from the store, I unexpectedly ran into my old friend again. The same friend who'd stirred confusion within me recently. My heart quickened, anxiety twisting sharply in my chest as he approached. This time, I resolved to maintain clear boundaries, to firmly guard against repeating past mistakes. Our conversation started calmly, carefully casual, focused only on safe topics. Yet beneath our polite surface, unresolved tension lingered, a quiet reminder of our last encounter. I felt the weight of his gaze, sensing a depth of emotion that made my resolve tremble slightly. I reminded myself of my family, my marriage, and the responsibility I held toward my stepson, whose trust I was desperately trying to regain. But as he gently reached out to touch my hand, old feelings stirred. Familiar, yet dangerous. My pulse quickened again, clouding my judgment momentarily. His expression was soft, understanding, inviting me silently to reconnect with feelings I'd long pushed away. Before I realized, he leaned toward me again, moving to kiss me softly. For a brief instant, I hesitated, a part of me yearning for comfort, companionship, escape from recent stresses. But clarity arrived swiftly, sharp and decisive. I pulled away immediately, clearly setting boundaries with my actions. My heart pounded loudly, torn between guilt and relief. I had nearly repeated a mistake I vowed never to revisit. Walking away quickly, embarrassment burned in my cheeks. Why had I allowed myself to come so close to repeating a past wrong? I questioned my strength, my ability to uphold the values I deeply believed in. How easily could emotional pain tempt us to abandon our principles, even momentarily? I felt humbled, recognizing how fragile my own resolve truly was. Returning home that evening, guilt lingered heavily on my conscience. Sitting alone, deep in thought, I acknowledged my mistake openly, if only to myself. I understood clearly now. Integrity isn't about perfection, but rather about choosing truth over comfort, even when temptation runs deep. My momentary lapse reminded me of the constant vigilance required to live authentically, to truly honor our commitments. Yet, amid guilt and reflection, I also found clarity and purpose. Perhaps this near mistake served as a crucial reminder. My role at home, guiding my stepson, demanded honesty, courage, and consistency. How could I teach him strength if I wavered myself? My struggles highlighted a universal truth. Vulnerability isn't weakness, but an essential part of growth. That night, lying quietly, I resolved again, this time more deeply, to live my values consistently, openly, without compromise. Every stumble teaches humility. Every recovery reaffirms strength. Through mistakes and their lessons, we learn what matters most. One afternoon, tidying the house, I came across my stepson's notebook lying open on his desk. Initially, I intended simply to close it, but words scribbled hastily on the page caught my attention, drawing me in with raw emotion. Before I knew it, I was reading, my heart aching deeply with every line. His writing revealed a hidden world of pain, self-doubt, and isolation. He expressed intense feelings of inadequacy, questioning his worth due to the harsh criticism he'd endured from others. The depth of his suffering shocked me, making it painfully clear how little I truly understood his inner turmoil. My stomach twisted, guilt and sadness colliding within me. Stepping back from the desk, I realized how isolated he must have felt, carrying these burdens alone. How did I miss these signs? How had silence become our norm? I was overcome with a fierce desire to help him, to actively rebuild his confidence, step by step, and guide him out of this emotional darkness. Yet, as I considered how to approach him, anxiety gripped me. Direct confrontation risked pushing him away again, damaging our fragile trust. Still, doing nothing seemed equally dangerous. I had to find a subtle, gentle way to intervene without exposing that I'd read his private thoughts. My heart told me patience alone wasn't enough anymore. He needed tools to heal, practical guidance to rebuild his self-esteem. That night, alone at the kitchen table, I began researching quietly. Books, articles, psychological resources focused on self-acceptance, resilience, and healing emotional wounds. As I gathered information, determination grew stronger within me. This could be our turning point. An opportunity to address issues openly, even indirectly, by integrating small changes into our daily lives, conversations, and routines. As I planned, I reflected deeply on the importance of emotional honesty, realizing how essential openness is in any family relationship. For both of us, silence had proven destructive. We'd hidden behind it, believing it's safer than vulnerability. But perhaps vulnerability was the key. The courage to show imperfections, admit pain, and support each other through life's uncertainties. Before bed, my mind felt clearer, calmer. Tomorrow, I'd gently begin introducing small gestures of encouragement and support, subtly reinforcing messages of self-worth. Slowly, intentionally, we'd break free from silence, transforming our shared struggles into mutual strength. Stepson's emotional walls, once solid and unyielding, slowly began to soften. His posture improved, his gaze lifted more frequently, and his interactions around the house became more relaxed, less guarded. Each small step forward felt deeply significant, like rays of sunlight finally breaking through heavy clouds after a long storm. Encouraged by these shifts, I continued carefully introducing resources I'd discovered: articles, inspirational quotes, and books about self-acceptance and resilience, casually leaving them around the house. At first, I wasn't sure if he noticed, but then signs appeared. Articles subtly repositioned, pages folded gently, indicating he'd quietly engaged with the material. A small triumph surged within me, bringing gentle reassurance that we were on the right path. Observing his slow return to normalcy filled me with pride, but also deep reflection. How fragile human emotions truly are. How quickly negativity can consume us, yet how powerfully genuine support can heal. Witnessing this gradual transformation reinforced my belief in the quiet strength of patience and unconditional presence. Yet, amid the joy of progress, I remained cautious. True healing rarely happens instantly. It requires consistency, compassion, and gentle reminders of worth. My role became clearer: steady support without judgment, creating an environment of trust where vulnerability felt safe. It reminded me that meaningful connections aren't built quickly but carefully, through shared moments of authenticity and quiet perseverance. Late one evening, as he lingered comfortably in the living room, flipping through a book I'd intentionally placed earlier, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. This peaceful moment represented so much: our struggles, growth, and willingness to move forward together. It illustrated a universal truth. Healing happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, yet profoundly changing lives. As I went to bed that night, reflection filled my thoughts. Our journey hadn't been easy, but it had deepened our bond, strengthened our understanding, and ultimately reinforced the powerful truth: vulnerability shared openly becomes strength multiplied infinitely. Early one morning, I walked into the kitchen to find an unexpected yet heartwarming sight. My stepson stood quietly by the stove, carefully preparing breakfast. The gentle smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the comforting aroma of toast and eggs. He looked up and offered me a shy but genuine smile, the first true smile I'd seen in weeks. I stood silently for a moment, absorbing the significance of this simple gesture. It was more than breakfast. It was his quiet way of saying thank you, of acknowledging our silent journey through struggle toward understanding and trust. My heart swelled with warmth, knowing how difficult yet transformative this period had been for both of us. As we ate together, comfortable silence settled between us. It was different now. No longer tense or heavy with unspoken pain, but filled with mutual respect, understanding, and quiet gratitude. This moment felt like an invisible bridge had finally connected us, built through honesty, patience, and acceptance of each other's vulnerabilities. Reflecting deeply as the morning light softly illuminated our table, I realized that the hardships we'd faced together had strengthened rather than weakened our bond. Mistakes, misunderstandings, emotional turmoil, all had taught us invaluable lessons about trust, communication, and unconditional support. It reminded me vividly how life's greatest challenges often become its most powerful teachers. Watching him, calm and at ease, I understood clearly that vulnerability and openness were not signs of weakness, but evidence of courage and maturity. Facing pain honestly allowed us both to heal, grow, and appreciate our shared humanity deeply. In that peaceful breakfast, I saw how far we'd come, no longer divided by silence, but unified by compassion and genuine care. Later, sitting quietly with my coffee, I resolved to always remember the power hidden in life's simplest acts: patience in difficulty, forgiveness after mistakes, and the bravery needed to show vulnerability. We had learned together that true strength lies not in perfection, but in embracing our imperfections openly and supporting each other unwaveringly through life's ups and downs.